what we do see is that it's an organizational structural problem that is causing the hiccup is right in there. And I think that if not rectified very, very quickly, organizations are going to quickly fall apart, because we're finding that as well, where you're getting like departmental or like regional mass exoduses because.
Hey, welcome back to the show. Got my longtime buddy and colleague, Dr. Ben Fung, physical therapist. I believe co-owner of Recharge. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. And I'm one of the founders of Recharge.
And then, of course, UpDoc Media. And I still get Gene and Ben's emails and listen to their show every so often. And we're just talking in the pre-interview about how they have this fairly newer, and I would say fairly, like the past maybe a couple of years, corporate quality podcast. And I just want to reach out to Ben. I was like, hey, I want to get you on the show. Let's chat. Let's chat about, I think, some of the biggest challenges with practice owners, which is recruiting and hiring, and then therapists online, at least sometimes Facebook. I know you'll probably have some comments about how things can come across on these Facebook groups with therapists and compensation and benefits and all that type of stuff. So first of all, let's just catch up with the audience. Anyone, I know a lot of folks already know you, but for those that don't, just a quick little background and then we'll get into it.
Oh, sure. So yeah, Ben Fung. I'm out of San Diego, California. I'm a PT. Before I was a PT, I was an engineer who really took full-time bartending to a thing and surfing. But life came around as it does for many. And then eventually I had a personal injury of sorts, and that led me to PT school and so forth. Eventually, after that, found myself some glass ceilings, got an MBA, and then founded UpDoc Media, which is now UpDoc Inc. It hosts UpDoc Media along with other divisions of UpDoc. Recharge Modern Health and Fitness, which is like a physio forward private practice. I'm also a co-founder, and really just my job is to empower the line clinicians at Restore Pelvic Physical Therapy, which is a women's health PT clinic that's nested within the Recharge facility itself. Nice. I'm probably most well known in the PT field for UpDoc as a brand, and mostly for the industry reports we put out, and that's namely the job market pulse salary report, the talent acquisition and retention report, the corporate quality index report, and then the practice management report, all through UpDoc Inc. All of those are open source, and most of those actually have like quote raw data where you can check our math if you really want to. And yeah, so that's kind of where we've been. UpDoc itself was probably known in the private practice realm as one of the first kind of full stack digital media and marketing companies. Since COVID and all that kind of stuff, we've really transitioned into, as much as we still service a lot of those things, build websites and stuff. Really, we're in the in organizational excellence, workforce intelligence and development, and executive business development. That's really where we are now. But yeah, that's me.
Cool, awesome. Well, do you still see like the biggest challenge in the whole physical therapy profession? If we take a step back, there's capped reimbursement or plateaued or declining reimbursement. And, you know, there was inflation, maybe less now, but in the past year or two, a little inflation. People were talking about higher cost of living across the country. I don't think you do as much anymore either in a lot of these Facebook groups, but I kind of lurk a little bit. I kind of see the sentiment a little bit. Is that the biggest challenge? Like, I know there's therapists that'll have an issue with like productivity, and they want to make more, and they're coming out of school with 100, 200, whatever, $1,000 worth of loan debt. I get it. I've been there. You've probably been there with your DPT and MBA and all that. No. Is that still the biggest challenge? Like, there's practice owners. We all want to recruit and hire great therapists. And then therapists are, at least in my experience, the past like 3-4 years, like interviewing therapists, and like some are great and like, but they all kind of want $95,000, $100,000 salary. Now, I know I'm biased because I'm in New York City, and but is this still the biggest challenge of the profession? Is the cap of reimbursement, which kind of caps compensation?
I mean, I would say you have to categorize the greatest challenge in physical therapy by its various categories, right? So there's always going to be the financial, there's always going to be the organizational, and there's always going to be the cultural. I don't think that any health, like clinical service health company or industry will ever say, hey, they're reimbursing me too much, right? Like, I don't think that you're ever going to see that. It's never been the case of that. And we don't even have to go into the history of how we even got here from like the PT of the 80s. But the fact of the matter is, like, in terms of reimbursement, yeah, it is what it is. And it's always going to be a huge challenge. And if you take a look at the practice management report that UpDoc put out, the top two challenges moving into this year, because it was released, I think, late 23. So here in early 24, the projected two largest challenges named by the practice managers that participated in that report were number one, recruiting, and number two, reimbursement. And I think it was like tied. I think it was like 30 something odd percent and 30 something odd percent. When you take away that financial piece of like, hey, it's just like cash flow sucks and we're not getting reimbursed enough. And there's a lot of things we can talk about on that front in general and specifically. It also goes back to the human resources of it all, because it sucks that we don't get reimbursed what we otherwise are, quote, worth to the social welfare of healthcare and society at large. I don't think anybody will dispute that. I don't even think the insurance companies dispute that, right? That's not in dispute. But here's the problem is we won't get reimbursed if we don't have licensees working with us and treating patients and billing for those things and then getting our AR in. So I'm biased, obviously, just because my inner workings most of the day and most of the weeks these days really focuses on that workforce intelligence BI piece. And a lot of it's regional too, right? Because you'll go like New Jersey isn't horrible with reimbursement, but other places like Colorado might be. And so some of those regional effects makes it a little harder, I think, to discuss the reimbursement talk from time to time. And which is why I think when you kind of take a look at like the global scale of what practice managers say is actually challenging the most, to me, it's recruitment. And I think it's always going to loom over us that, hey, us therapists should be reimbursed better.
Yeah. With Recharge, are you guys are probably not in network, right? Are you just out of network, or you take a dollar amount at the date of service?
We're a membership based operation. So the way we work is, because we're physio forward, we work on health promotion first, and then if you happen to have some type of issues, we take care of it under the membership bracket, for lack of better terms. So it's all prompt pay or direct pay or cash, if you want to call it that. I hail from an older time, and so like I've never heard it as cash until like probably the 20 teens. It was always prompt pay or direct pay when I was, quote, growing up in healthcare.
Even though it's still fairly, I don't know, I don't want to say new, but like it's not across all maybe communities or what. Like my parents, they're on Medicare, and like they tried some out of pocket, therapists, but they like to go to offices that accept their Medicare. And like now for my practice, like we're mobile in New York City, and we do out of network and, like you said, private pay, direct pay, whatever. And so if they happen to live in New York City and they were not my parents, like they would just not be my ideal client. But again, it's regional. It's just, but I think it's still a new, I don't want to say a new phenomenon, but it's just like most people will call up a therapy office, doctor's office, whatever.
Yeah. Do you take my insurance?
Do you take my insurance?
Yeah. That classic question.
That's how they were taught by their family or their parents or whatever. Just like every place a lot of families assume like every doctor, every physical therapist, like they're all licensed, they're all like legit, and it's all pretty much the same. And so it's just the only question therefore is, do you take my insurance? As opposed to nowadays, it's like more like looking at Google reviews, almost like, like picking a restaurant. If we're going to find a hotel, if I'm going to come visit you in San Diego, we got to find a hotel or an Airbnb. I'm going to look at reviews. It's like more consumer centric now, which is great. It just, I don't know. It just changed the times.
It's a more involved and sophisticated health consumer kind of behavior set that you're dealing with now. I mean, some of that dips back into UpDoc's roots in marketing. But really, like, you're right on. Like it's newer. I would say what it is. It's an emerging market within a market in and of itself for a certain consumer base. And that consumer base is very specific. By and large, you're still going to have a classical, if you will, healthcare consumer mindset is who's the best, that's closest, and takes my insurance. That's not always going to be the best financial circumstance for that consumer, and that consumer royally, if you will, like the royal you, they're figuring it out. Which is why I think you're starting to see these out of network and prompt pay, direct pay, cash membership, package based engagements, even concierge membership engagements are really popping up because I like to joke about this. Like time isn't necessarily money. Time is a vehicle for value, and time is that one commodity you never get back. And so I think people are starting to really realize and accept that as just part of the human experience, and then they start to put a premium on that, right, in the form of cash.
Yeah. With the data that you guys are collecting and have collected over the years, like, what are you seeing in terms of therapists? Like, is there a change in physical therapists in terms of, are they moving different states to find better opportunities? I mean, I feel like there's more sharing of data because of like the Facebook groups, your platform as well, like, your reports, and you have like this, I mean, I don't know if probably your idea that came up with this, like to have therapists from across the country provide, therapist generated data, and then you anonymize it and you put it into a report or whatever. What are you seeing from that data that's like the most like interesting or surprising over the past couple of years?
Well, again, I'll go in categories. So from the management side, what was probably, it's not surprising, but I think the number itself is shocking. And this comes from the practice management report, if I remember correctly, as we asked the practice managers at all levels and lines, well, what's your greatest struggle? They identified hiring, and then they eventually broke it down to, is it hiring or is it retention or is it both? And overlapping statistics, because that matters with context, 90% of respondents are either struggling with hiring or retention or both. There's like a minority report of like 3% that is struggling with only retention but not hiring. So like I can get them in, but they just never stay. Yeah. On the talent end, what we're really seeing is kind of, for lack of better terms, and honestly, I think that the practice owners and managers are feeling the same way. I think this is a cultural fallout from COVID, which is the BS meter is full, right? The BS filter is full. Like no one has time for nonsense anymore. And it really sucks because I think as a fellow private practitioner and practice owner, I think it hurts the smaller business owners most because they just don't have the volume or bandwidth to deal with capriciousness. I just read another report like yesterday, something like this is industry agnostic, so it's not just healthcare. It's like everything. It's something like 90 something percent of like the Gen Z applicants will ghost an interview, and like 80 something percent don't show up the first day just to test their employer.
So I specifically on the front end of that, what I've noticed in the past year or two, for the first process of, like, let's say someone applies on our LinkedIn ad, Indeed ad, whatever.
Yeah.
The first touch point, we get the resume, we schedule a call. I send them, I'll send them like a Calendly link for them, and we're scheduling a 15-minute phone screen. They call me, and dude, it is wild how many scheduled calls.
What's your arrival rate?
I mean, it's bad. It's like, probably close to like 50-60%. It's insane. Yeah. But then then they're self-selecting out. Mm-hmm. And like you're saying,
that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, no, it's a great thing for me. It saves me time. It saves me time. And what I just wanted to say, as soon as you said ghosting, I'm like, I totally have seen that. And it's no disrespect. Like, I'm 37, and the newer grads, like, they're a bit younger, and maybe that's how they're going to roll. It's not everyone, and there's obviously very awesome new grads.
There's a distribution. This isn't like a bang down on Gen Z. It's like one of those. I remember one of my favorite memes from like 10 years ago or something like that, or rather was like on millennials, right? And it was like, look, millennials now are like the oldest of the millennials are like 34 now or something like that, and they have like a house and a mortgage and 2.5 kids and like whatever. So I need you to get completely off my back, right? Like that was like a meme from a while ago. And this isn't a generational issue. It's not an ageism issue. This is a moment in time. This is a workforce culture problem. So, like, to clarify, like on that front, what we're really seeing is that candidates / applicants are not committing unless they see their basic like must-haves fulfilled on either a job posting or in their interview. Like they will just shut down completely.
So meaning like really like tactical. So like salary range or a salary number, PTO days, like what else?
what's my working environment? What's my my therapist to aide or tech ratio? What's my therapist to therapist assistant ratio? How many visits am I going to be seeing a day, a week, a month? What's my productivity? Like, when is productivity good, bad, and I'm getting punished for it? How much am I getting punished for it? Like, what percent of the blame am I taking for no shows and cancellation rates that I can't necessarily, but I also can control? Those kind of things are getting, like, is essentially, think of it from like an online dating profile, right? The problem, however, is that, and I mean, I think anybody who's ever dated online will tell you this. Like, funny enough, I actually met my wife through an online channel before online dating was even a thing, right? So that's kind of how far I go back, but like on the cusp of it. But that said, like contemporary modern dating is like it's almost too good to be true for a lot of cases, where you have to oversell the circumstance on both ends, right? And then, like, when you get in, you feel like everybody got catfished. And that was actually a theme at CSM when Gene Shirakawa, my partner in crime at UpDoc, he went out there like I did last year in San Diego, just going to survey the convention floor. Like, the number one thing was all about recruiting. But the problem is that it's all about like flashy numbers or flashy approaches without developing any kind of true rapport or relationship. And that relationship piece, that trust piece, is what's actually very much missing. You do have to be honest about, like, hey, this is what I'm offering and this is what's available to you. And there has to be a conversation for that. But it's a massive, massive struggle, and it goes both ways. I think it hurts the hiring manager more than anybody else when it comes to like the ecosystem of it all, because right now it really is an applicant's market when it comes to 90% of some of the respondents in practice management saying, "Look, I have some kind of HR problem."
Got it. Well, so to support what is it, Gen X? What's the current crop?
Gen Z is the current like new workforce bit, and then Gen Alpha, that's like like my kids' age.
So Gen Z are new grads now.
They're new grads now.
Okay, so Gen Z, to support them, what you were saying with what they're looking for in a job post is, if I could kind of break down what you just said, which is like they're looking for clarity, like they're looking for some of those data points just in the job post before they even go into the whole recruiting process. Is that correct?
Correct. Absolute transparency as much as you can afford. Absolute clarity as much as you can afford. A very clear job salary range, a very clear description of what your roles and responsibilities are, what the clinical setting is going to look like, what your support staff looks like, what your hours are going to be, if you're going to be asked to do overtime, if you're going to be asked to work weekends, if you're going to be asked to work like maybe like a work comp like 6 a.m. shift or a work comp like 7 p.m. shift. And I'm speaking that just specifically to outpatient. We can talk about like home health and med B or outpatient at home as well. But it needs to be perfectly clear, right? Because you have to go back to the idea of the dating environment, right? Like it's dating is just the framework. We're talking about a form of social contract that's newly evolved, right? It's in a dating profile, I get to select like height, hair color, like all that kind of stuff, right? Cultural background, languages spoken, religious background, political affiliations, all that kind of stuff. So all of those kind of pre-selectors have to be present in your job post for you to even stand a chance, right? Like we've had clients at UpDoc who've spent thousands and thousands of dollars a month on Indeed or Glassdoor or LinkedIn ads or what have you, and they get all these views, right? Because I mean, these platforms, it's just like Yelp. Yelp will show you, hey man, like 250,000 people in your town have seen you. And then, of course, the diligent manager will be like, well, how many clicks did I get? I'm like, oh, you got one. Right? So that didn't do any good. So it has nothing to do with the fact of eyes. It has to do with the fact that the eyes aren't seeing what they want to see.
Mm. So historically, with my style of practice, like when we get new patients, new clients reaching out, prospective patients, if they are like, sometimes they're physicians or it's like, someone in finance, investor, or whatever, and it's like their assistant reaching out, those types of individuals will typically, and like it could be like physicians, psychiatrists, whoever, like those types of folks, people in finance, investors, hedge fund managers, whatever, or the assistants of those folks. Usually it's over text or email, and they're less likely to call in. And that's fine. And then there's other folks that are like, let's say 40, 50, 60 years old, and they're more likely to call in. They want to, they want to do their process of like finding the right fit for, in-home low back pain or low, in-home physical therapy for like their mother or father, whatever. So for the most part, the past 5-6 years, it's typically through phone call, unless we know the person is like super busy, and that's fine, right? The current crop that I'm seeing of the new grad physical therapists reaching out to us, they seems like they want to do more things digitally, which kind of goes back to you saying they want to see a very detailed job description.
Mm-hmm.
But arguably, they're not as busy as these physicians, hedge fund managers, executives, investors, whatever. And they want to do things over text or specifically email and call and speak with me less often. I don't know if that's a generational thing, a behavioral thing. You're seeing this?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely both. And you also see it like on various like regions of the United States geography. You know, and usually urban centers, it's really like, don't call me, just text me. Usually more rural or more in like the Midwest, it's a lot more like, yeah, no, just call. Like, why are you texting me? Like, it's gonna take it for forever to text. You know, it's like, well, I want to text you because I want to text you on my time. You know, like that kind of stuff. But it's both, right? So again, I think it has to do with a certain level of like workforce culture, less generationally, less age brackety, because you'll get millennials, like I'm what they call an elder millennial or ex-millennial or whatever, you know, like it's between generations. And there are times where I'm like, I just need to call somebody. Other times I'm like, you know what, I'll just text or just text me and then we'll find a time. And yes, arguably they're not as busy as like a orthopedic surgeon who has like chronic neck pain and is in the OR suite like 18 hours a day, right? Like, you know, on a Monday. But it is cultural, right? And I agree. I do see that. You need to the royal you, right? If you're a hiring manager, you're a practice owner, you're like HR executive, or maybe you're like a PT who's like COO, you need to work with like the benefits or the HR director and find ways so that these applicants can convey their intentions to you on those mediums, right? It's no different than patients, right? The patients used to look at white pages and then eventually it was just Google. For a while it was social media, and then it got back to Google and Yelp, but mostly Google, just because Yelp isn't very friendly to like professionals per se on the healthcare spectrum. But you know, it's a more sophisticated healthcare consumer shopper behavior. It's also a much more sophisticated, applicant employer shopping behavior, because these applicants now they grew up in the digital age, right? They have all the information they ever needed and wanted to do before they made any choices in life at a very young age, right? And you have to respect that as it is. And you have to meet them where they are. No different than, you know, some of the UpDoc marketing clients back in the day. It was like, look, I know you want to specialize in X, Y, or Z or become that specialist in your region, but you have to meet your people where they are now. And then you can start expanding into the different forays that you want to be seen in and as. That's a hard ask sometimes, right? It's a difficult shift, but it's a necessary shift if you want to capture that talent. And certainly there's going to be some self-selectors that are embedded within it. That's a smart way of playing it, right? Like the ones that don't call you. Great, you're out, right? That's part of my selection process. And there's a lot of clever ways that you can do it to pre-qualify candidates. But it is kind of a numbers game now of like how many eyes, how many clicks, how many applicants can you get? And those that kind of adapt there and can get quick trust in, those are the ones that we find are winning. And a lot of it has to do with what happens in clinic by the leaders themselves. And sometimes like just like a basic clinical leader, like getting a good like senior clinician in place can make all the difference, right? Getting the right middle manager in place can get all the difference. That's another big problem we're seeing right now in our space is the middle manager space is a vastly underdeveloped and under-equipped role.
Yeah, got it. How about for any practice owners watching or listening, any tips for a Gen Z individual that is part of their, you know, wave of folks that they're recruiting? Like for me, it's like that 15-minute phone screen. And then it's like, that is to make sure that it's the right fit to invest time in the next step, which is like a 60-minute Zoom call like this.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's like in-person eval. So they treat me to, you know, hands-on treatment, evaluation, little like that 1 hour, but in person. So each of these steps like builds off of each other. With the changes that you're seeing with like their preferences, their behavior, their preferences, any tips for practice owners out there to kind of be flexible or amenable to that type of a new grad or new physical therapist? Like, do they need to change their process? Do I need to change my process a bit? Or is it more of like, I want to be flexible, but I also need to be rigid of like my milestones of like taking someone through the interview process to make sure that they're the right fit. But at the same time, being flexible, like if they need to communicate or want to communicate more over like asynchronous, you know, text or email at their convenience, Whereas an old school practice owner might have preferred like phone call for everything. You know what I mean? So like, is there like a balance in the middle, or like any tips there?
I'm going to go kind of like deep philosophy, and I'm going to use martial arts as the kind of framework, and then we'll back it back down to what you can do today. So I've been, for the most part, up until about like 2019, like a lifelong martial arts student. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai boxing, like a slew of like Chinese martial arts, Filipino knife fighting, eskrima, all that kind of stuff. But let's stick with like MMA for just because I think everybody understands that, right? Everybody knows like quote cage fighting and UFC and all that kind of stuff and one championship or whatever the heck it is. All said, right? Like you need to be good at striking. Like you need to be able to punch, kick, elbow, knee. You need to wrestle. You need to know submissions. You need to have good cardio. You need to have all these things. If you take a look at the progression of where MMA was, back in the early 90s, all the grapplers did really, really well because most of the people that competed there were basically only strikers. They only did stand-up striking. As that progressed, everybody became very good at grappling, but then the people that were like super high-end striking started to win championships because they knew how to grapple and strike. But most people kind of focused on that whole wrestling jiu-jitsu piece because that was what was winning, a half generation earlier. Pretty soon, you got these like super athletes that they were just good at everything, right? Like they were good at every range of fighting and so forth. And you get through ebbs and flows of that. HR, recruiting, and connecting with your workforce is no different. So back in the day, it was who's a good employer? Where's a good place to work, right? It was word of mouth. And then now we're talking about early information discovery and all the information is out there. So to answer your question, like, are there things that you can do? Do I need to change? The answer is yes, right? You have to change with where the market is going. And this is very much my marketing MBA bias is I believe very strongly because the evidence-based business, if you will, literature follows that is if people are shopping online, you need to sell online. If people are doing researching online, they need to do it online. If people are doing like contactless payment, then you need to do it that way, right? If people are using Venmo, and Zelle and that kind of stuff, you have to transact in that way. Yep. And if people are not going into the bank to do like deposits anymore, then you have to shift your business model. It doesn't mean you're changing who you are. It just means you're changing the avenues of how you operate, right? And part of the way you operate is you have to have a pipeline to attract talent and to get candidates, and then you also have the pipeline to develop your workforce. And specifically, excuse me, speaking to the pipeline on attracting. You very much, and again, this is the royal you very much need to have a system in place where you're easily discoverable online, per the practice management, or no, per the job market pulse that we just released before CSM. It was like late January 2024, something like 56% of people are looking on Indeed at either the first, second, or third overlapping search for jobs, right? So Indeed is where you're going to have the most eyes, followed by LinkedIn, and then depending on the last one, it depends on like kind of where regionally you are, right? So you need to make very easy ways for them to apply, or at least it's almost like a letter of intent, right? But it's like a moment of intent, like text me, I'm interested, right? Like it can just be texting a Google number, like I'm interested, I like your salary range, like start there. So it becomes more microtransactions, which is very much in vogue in terms of pretty much anybody who's been part of the gaming culture and their birthday starts with like a 1978 or later, or younger. And it's part of the embedded piece of like app experience in terms of the user experience. Everybody understands micro purchases and stuff like that. Like it's just part of it. So you have to micro purchase your way into getting a candidate to become an applicant. And from there, you have to do different things that are absolutely mobile friendly to do your screening process. So like in your case, right, if scheduling a call is part of your screening process, great, make it part of that, right? If that's like a big piece, like on time, on target every single time is part of your organizational values, then you make that part of it. You can't flex on that. But other pieces, like maybe you just want to do that just to like suss out who that person is, like in like a lifetime environment. Well, you can actually do that through some like asynchronous pieces. You can do those. What's really, really popular in the tech environment is they'll give you video response queues where you get to record twice only, something like 35 to 75 seconds, a response, right? And it'll be like, Ben, tell me about a time when you felt overwhelmed in life. It can be for work and be for life in general and what you did about it. You have 35 seconds to reply and you have one re-record after that, right? Go. And so it gives you an idea of how that person can operate in a pressure sensitive environment, and it's quasi live, right? Like they only get two tries, right? They only get two tries, and you can do voice recordings, and you can even do like something I recommend in terms of like a noted skill set, which it's a sensitive environment, but like it has to do with like multi-platform competency, right? It's like how well do you do with like multiple tabs on your screen and doing like Okta or Google Verify codes, and like do you understand what those things are? Like, because that needs to be part of a base competency if you're gonna have like an office manager that also has to have some tech duties, right? So like it pervades everything. It's not just for the therapists and clinicians. It can also be for your support staff. It could be for your business management staff. It can be for everything. Other pieces that can be involved also is just one click of applications. Very, very popular. It gets a lot more actual action. And again, it's about numbers. Like, yeah, quality matters, but you're not going to get any quality if you get nothing, right? It's almost like fishing. Like if you use the wrong bait and you have no bites, you're not going to have any fish. So putting that kind of stuff out there and then being able to flex yourself in that environment to work in those channels that the current crop of talent is currently operating. And I mean, I would say that this is for Gen Z, Gen Y, and certainly Generation X. And there's also some very, very tech savvy baby boomers that, if you're doing middle management and upper management scouting, they're going to be very tech savvy individuals that also don't have that much time because they value other aspects of time in their life. And you have to make it user friendly for them in a way where both parties can convey missions and values and what you guys want from each other in a way that creates a certain level of relationship.
And we'll link all that below, the job market pulse for 2024, that whole report. Anything else from that is a change from the past 5 years, or anything else that was surprising to you guys?
I mean, from a numerical standpoint, I think that middle management is probably the big weak link right now in our field. And again, it's not the middle manager, it's the role of the middle management space that seems to be an issue. If memory serves properly, it's something like only a difference of like $3,000 a year between a middle manager and like line managing PT. And
like between like a clinic director and like a regional director, or what do you mean?
Something like that on average. And so it's basically a clinician that has management duties versus like a regional director that probably is just doing management, may see a couple of patients, that kind of stuff. And we're seeing that, again, very pervasively. And so there's a numerical problem there where the middle managers are being under incentivized. But again, we find that there's a developmental problem there where that's where everything gets stuck. And I think it's, again, not the problem of the people there. There's a upper pipeline and a downward pipeline problem, in terms of like echelons and if you're into like organizational excellence, like there's a span of control issues that are there that are very, very pervasive and problematic. Again, it's not a person problem. It's hard to not take it personally. But what we do see is that it's an organizational structural problem that is causing the hiccup is right in there. And I think that if not rectified very, very quickly, organizations are going to quickly fall apart, because we're finding that as well, where you're getting like departmental or like regional mass exoduses because stuff keeps falling through one way or the other. So either it's the message isn't being passed upstairs or the downstairs message isn't being properly translated through. So I think that's one of the bigger discovery pieces that has really been building up to a head across all the industry reports at UpDoc, not just the Pulse. The Pulse just shed a light on the numerical fact of quoting Han Solo, because pre-show I had the Millennium Falcon background, the virtual background.
I didn't ask you to change it, but you just did it on your own.
Yeah, I just did it on my own. But like there's a quote from Han Solo in episode 4 where he's being berated by Princess Leia, and he just like throws his arms up. It's like, no reward's worth this, and that's becoming kind of a sentiment of frustrated middle managers. Like they worked really hard to get what they are. They may or may not have aspirations to move up, or at least do more and be recognized. That recognition piece is really huge. But it's coming to a point where you really need some honest feedback to see where the problems are. And often it's not like it's not a presence of a negative. It's a lack of a very important positive that is keeping the workforce from being like truly well tuned in terms of production value and engagement value.
Got it. I should have asked this earlier, but for the job market pulse, are the users, like the therapists across the country, when they input data into it, the report anonymously, like it's like their role, their state location, their salary, like what are some of the other data points that they're putting in?
Zip code, if they're full time or not, if they negotiated or not, what was the process of negotiation or their travel contract. They talk about seniority from time to time. So there's a lot of open-ended areas. There's also some numerical pieces there. We always normalize it as a per annum equivalent. This year, we were very, very, very clear about the fact that every single salary study has a positive skew, which means that the mean sits above the median. So everybody feels underpaid because you have a long tail, right? There's a few super high-paid individuals in a crop of like 100 people. And so, when you look at 50, you're like, wait a minute, like most everybody is in like 45 to like the 25 range, and they all feel underpaid, but that's actually where the most of the distribution is. So like an understanding statistics is kind of important, and we lay that out very, very clearly in this year's edition, just because we didn't want there to be any kind of misunderstanding of like like some popular uprising, right? Like that's not the purpose of this. The whole idea is to empower both the applicant and the hiring manager to understand like, hey, what is actually out there? Because like you said, you opened this episode I think with, you have new grads going, yeah, I need like $95,000 to $104,000 a year, right? And an outpatient, that can be considered to be a little bit bananas depending on where you are, right? Like, are you producing that kind of value in terms of your particular license-based AR? Most people probably aren't. And so there needs to be a conversation surrounding that. But that's an arbitrary number that got kind of embedded, and we don't necessarily have to get into how that got there. The fact is it's there. So, part of the reason the Pulse exists is so that people can have an honest understanding of like, hey, what is the market actually in my space? And you can go to the raw data and check your zip code and be like, okay, it's about here, right? And there's also a huge standard deviation. This is something we reported on in the Pulse for years. It's like a 20% plus or minus standard deviation in outpatient PT. I think it's like down to like 17-ish now, I think. But overall, the industry is like 22 to 25 sometimes. So, if you're talking 80K average, like 96 might be normal. 8 might be normal, I think, is like the range. But that's like normal in terms of like statistical reasonability. Is it reasonable for you? Is it reasonable for your practice? That's kind of a management and an applicant candidate decision. And that needs to be talked about. And I think talking about it is one of the first key steps that isn't happening. I'll use the chess term accurately. So, I wouldn't say it's called correct. I'm just saying you need to speak on it accurately. You have to make accurate moves to get the right person in the right place at the right time.
That's awesome. Great place to pause, Ben. Want to have you back anytime. What's a good place, I guess, updocmedia.com, or where can they, we'll put it in the show notes below, but where can they go to download this report if they don't have it already?
Yeah, UpDocMedia.com. If you scroll down like one half scroll, all of our report links are all there. You can email me, ben@updoc.com. You can text me 470-BEN-FUNG. That goes straight to my phone. And everything else is pretty much always there. And it's all free for you. Like that's part of how we operate at UpDoc as both a business development firm as well as a media firm. Is there's an aspect of how we do it that becomes open source and free, and then from there you get to decide if we're the right people for you. And I think that philosophy there is actually very compatible if you were to flip that of, hey, we're an employer out here, here's the information for you, are we the right employer for you? And I think that mindset piece can do wonders in terms of your recruitment strategy.
And I'm just looking right now. You guys have a prospectus. When did you publish this? Look at this.
Oh, that's a little old. Yeah. So it's actually Amazon best-selling, but we have a prospectus. It was a lot of fun to do. It became best-selling pretty quickly. And we've been thinking about doing a new one. Like we talk about it almost every single year. But yeah, it's there. There's so much information that we have and we utilize on a B2B basis that isn't published just because there's not enough information to responsibly publish it. This is a very common thing in economic studies. It's very common in a lot of basic science studies where you have some data, but it's not statistically significant or reasonably volumetric enough to say, hey, I can say publicly it's X, Y, or Z. But there are these insights that we do have, and we're very happy to talk about it.
That's awesome, Ben. You gave your personal marketing or personal cell phone number out. I don't know, but it's a great move. I love it.
Well, it's to be honest, I mean, to you guys listening to it, it's a Google Voice number. It's free. right? Every practice manager and owner I know loves free things. Every PT I know loves free things, right? We're not made of money. We're not, orthopedic surgeons or neurosurgeons. It's a different economy for us, as much as it should or probably could be differently given other circumstances. But it is free, and it routes to my personal number. So that's why I have it set up that way, and it's easy to remember. It's my name.
Awesome. Dr. Ben Fung, guys, go check out UpDoc Media. I'm going to link it below for the job market pulse and some of the other reports that they have. I get nothing from it. I wanted to have my friend and colleague, Ben, on the show.
Appreciate
Ben,
it.
thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you for having me, Dave.
Hey, it's Dave Kittle. Are you a healthcare business owner or physical therapy practice owner who is looking to figure out your succession plan or exit strategy? We might be able to help. And in fact, we may be interested in acquiring your practice. If you're interested, you can reach out to me. Shoot me an email at dave@conciergepainrelief.com. That's DAVE at CONCIERGE painrelief.com. Or you can call me at any time, 646-781-8884.